Good morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody this morning. This is the healing session. We have a lot to cover today. So by the end of this session, you're going to know some things. What sort of things are you going to know? First off, you're going to know exactly where Anhui is within China, because we're going to talk about that and talk about the importance of Anhui. Secondly, you're going to know a lot more about Qi Hong or Qima needle type teas than you ever really imagined. So we're going to focus on those two areas today. Along the way, we'll probably throw in a few other things that you'll end up knowing as well. So let's talk a little bit about shop news and then let's get into the maps. And by the way, you're hearing me talk about maps. Now, for those of you who got up 10 minutes ago and got on the session and didn't check your email, now would be a good time to check your email because I sent you two maps, a map of China in general and a map of Anhui Province. In the meantime, the shop news this week is as follows. We continue to test all the tea that's come in within the last couple weeks. We expect to be finished with that project sometime next week. As we finish, all the teas should start to go up on the boards and some of the teas will come down. So some of these teas, either because of the burglary or in general, because we didn't order much of them, have short supply. So what we have today has short supply, healing. The green tea that ultimately has extremely short supply, and this is because of the burglary, is heirloom. So for those of you who love green tea, make sure you try heirloom soon. And if you really enjoy it, then purchase it because once it's gone, it's gone. And the story of that thing is very unique. The story of heirloom is very unique. It comes from one of the spiritual mountains in China. It's really associated more with Buddhist than Taoist, but both of them have special affinity or attachment to this mountain. All right, that's the shop news. Let's talk about China and the physical characteristics of China. So look in your email and you're going to see a map. And in this map, you're going to see a whole picture of China. And Anhui Province is in red. So you'll see that thing. And why I did this is to give you a relativity in terms of where things are in China. So we talk about Anhui Province, move to the right and you see Shanghai. Now, for some reason, Shanghai isn't in a green color, it's in a dark gray. That seems to imply something, and indeed it does. Shanghai has provincial level status. So it's almost like the city itself is a province. That's why it's separate there. Are there any of these other weird anomalies in China? Answer is yes. So if you go due north, you'll see something in blue called Liaoning. Come down to the bottom of Liaoning and go to the left and you'll see something called Tianjin. Tianjin is also a provincial level city. If you move right above Tianjin to that green, Beijing is a provincial level city. And then lastly, if you go to the bottom of the map, you'll see Guangdong. That's Canton Province. If you move to the left, right beside it, it's Guangxi Province. Now, move up through Guizhou, and then you'll see a place called Chongqing, Chongqing. That's also a provincial level city. So I'm, again, just trying to get you situated in China in general. Anhui, sometimes you've heard of me talk of it as North Central. It's really really pretty central overall. Although, if you're in the very most northern part of that, it's really, really cold during winter and therefore not as available to grow tea. Most of the great tea comes from the southern half of Anhui. So let's go ahead now and look at the individual map of Anhui. And I'm going to point out one or two things. I know nobody thought they were going to get a geography lesson this morning, but you know, if you don't know where you are, you can't understand everything. Oh, you can understand lots, but you can understand more if you know where you are. So if you look on this map in yellow of Anhui by itself, you see right in the center with an airplane and a bluish star is someplace called Hefei, H-E-F-E-I. That's the capital, the provincial capital of Anhui. Now, if you go due south, almost at the border bottom, and then slightly right, you see something called Qimen, Q-I-M-E-N. Now, Qimen is where we're going today with healing, because healing comes from that area. And you see a bunch of other famous places in this area. So if you go at a right diagonal, you'll see Huangshan, H-U-A-N-G, space S-H-A-N. And that's the Yellow Mountains. So I'm just trying to get you centered. Most of the greatest tea comes from Anhui, comes from the southern cap. So that's the end of the geography lesson this morning. Just wanted to get you situated. You know, there is one other thing that you're going to take away from this morning's session. And that is they're doing something special in most of these provinces. It's a national directive, but it's implemented province by province. And in Anhui in particular, what they've done is instructed all forms of media. So the things that we most obviously understand here, television, radio, then the social media, things like the Facebook equivalent in China, historical recordings. They've integrated all of those and are looking for something called intangible cultural characteristics. That's how they labeled it in Anhui. And this is fascinating because tea falls under that category. Why in the world would tea fall under that category? I mean, when I make tea, I can feel it. It's tangible. When I go there, I can touch the bushes. I can shake the farmer's hands. Very tangible. What is it I can't do? I can't do the boutique process of taking these beautiful leaves and making them into a delicious beverage. That's what I can't do. And most people in China can't do that. So they have done this project to capture such things as folk dance, folk tales, acrobatics. Anhui is very, very famous for acrobatics. The arts in general, some of the carvings that they do in Anhui, they've done several of these different programs on these types of historically intangible, important cultural characteristics of Anhui. So tea was recognized as one of those. And so the Qimen area in particular, there's a lot of focus on that. The Tunxi area, which is just south of Qimen, that produces some craft green tea. And then there's many areas in the southern part of Anhui that also produce craft green tea, the Yellow Mountains being one of them. Mountains both to the east and to the west of the Yellow Mountains which produced such things as Premier's Choice, Wong's Creation. So you have a bunch of unusual processes with stories behind them. So the Chinese are focusing a lot of attention on capturing this type of information. Oh, and that's not all. What else are they capturing? Customs related to tea. So every place has certain customs. So marriage customs related to tea. Wait a minute, isn't this China? I mean, isn't there one marriage custom and tea falls within that marriage custom? And the answer would be no. Every province has special characteristic customs related to tea and marriage. And so they're capturing that information. They're capturing information related to tea and every sort of gathering and celebration and holiday. So at some point, there'll be a total library of all the customs related to tea. Now, why is this important? This suggests that maybe these customs might be endangered. Well, let's think for a minute. Every boutique item, whether it's in the West, whether it's in China, wherever it is always endangered, isn't it? Because so many of the secrets are passed from generation to generation. And unless you have good capture, that is imagery or storytelling capture, this stuff can get lost forever. China has lost some significant cultural attributes related to tea. There have been some types of tea that they have in literature, but they don't have the understanding of the process today. So this is why the National Academy of Sciences in the 1980s in China started to think about this issue. And by the 1990s and the 2000s, fully involved in encouraging all the provinces, not just tea, but other culturally unique, boutique, relevant items to be captured visually, to get the stories behind them, and to get histories behind them. Okay, more than you ever want to know about what's going on from that aspect. But the good news is that if you ever want to go research this stuff later, it will be there. It will be in the archives and you'll be able to research this stuff. It's really cool. It's really cool what they're doing. And they're identifying these, in quotes, tea masters. Now, remember in past weeks, I have talked about so-called tea masters and put them at a secondary level to the scientists. Well, they're still at that secondary level. However, those who are like with Premier's Choice and Wong's Creation, the only ones who really know how to do this, all of a sudden, they're ranked right up there with the scientists because this craft is disappearing. And when it goes, it's gone. You won't have the ability, aside from these archives, really, it's hard to replace 30 or 40 or 50 years of experience. It really is. All right. So let's move forward. And what do I want to do first? I think I want to give a little bit of history of the Chiman area, and then we're going to get into the brewing. Let's see how I'm doing time-wise. Oh, as usual, over time. You know what? I think we're going to start right away with the demonstration. Oh, and the tea master is looking totally numinous and beautiful, which means she's ready to come to camera. So without further ado, let me bring in Xiaobei, who will demonstrate and then brew with you.
Hey everyone, 早上好 Good morning. Yeah, we do 祁门红茶 Chiman tea. Today I little bit change my style. So I still, my name is Xiaobei. Yes. So today, Yeah, we work in Qimen factory, it's a long time before. Yeah. So I learned a lot of, the tea master in Qimen, yeah, factory. So today, so I little bit change it, but looking my skill, how my hands. So also, so yeah, so even so this is the three glasses, three cups, so John take me, I use the 175. Yeah. First.
Yes, so you should already be preparing your 175 degree water. You're going to first watch Xiaobei, and what she's going to do is dissipate the steam. It'll end up being cooler. It'll end up being around 170. And the first thing she's going to do is go through a process. What temperature did you use? 175. Okay. So she's going to heat the cups, make sure that there's no water stains or anything, soap stains, I should say, anything that doesn't belong on the glasses. And as she touches the cups, she then becomes aware of what the temperature is. She's cleaning the string. All right. And she's getting bag number 3 heating. And she's going to put it in the heated cup. She's going to shake. She's going to smell to make sure it's the right tea. Great. And then she's going to set the timer
2 minutes.
for 2 minutes. Okay. Let's talk about process. Everybody knows the red tea process by now. It's the same as it was last week when we talked about Ruby Gates. So you pick, you wither, then you knead or you roll, you oxidize, and you bake. That's the basic process. But remember, this belongs to so-called gongfu, Gongfu, red tea. And that means that there's going to be additional steps. How many additional steps might there be? There can be up to 10 additional steps. So we're going to talk about what the realm of those steps is today. And remember, the people who are working on steps 6 through 15, these are people who all have at least 10 years experience in the industry. Most of them average around 20 plus years in the industry because these are processes that they look easy, just like all these processes, but they're not. And you need to have judgments all along the way. And this is the intangible art of this tea. The first 5 steps, not very intangible. That's pretty standard. These next 10 steps, very hard, very hard. And that's why most red tea not coming from Chiman area is not gongfu tea. As soon as you get to the gongfu tea, you have those additional steps. I can prove it to you. Last week when we did Ruby Gates, you remember how delicate all those leaves were? That wasn't an accident. That was accomplished through these steps. All right, the timer's gone off. Tea master is separating the tea from the tea liquid. And look at this end result. Most of you, when you think of red tea, you think of, as they have it here in the West, something called black tea, which is usually very dark. But look at this thing. Look at how light this is. This is light and delicate. So the first thing you're going to do is smell the leaves. By the way, I didn't have to put my nose in here. The smell was so strong I could get, but it's nice to emphasize. And this is a fabulous smell. And then we're going to enter the quality arena. That means we're going to take 175, actually 70 to 75 degree sip. We're going to make evaluations about dryness on the tongue. And we're going to think about what aftertaste we're getting. We're also going to think about the energetics of this tea. How are you feeling as you drink it? So let's go ahead and take the sip. So I get my first indication of what how it's falling on the tongue. The astringency, I get an indication of some energetics already. And remember, it's not a bad thing if you don't get an indication of energetics. Everybody's different. Some get it faster, some get it slower, some don't get it at all. That's all okay. I'm going to take a second taste here. It's not so much a taste as trying to understand the full quality nature of this tea. Yes.
Jeremy mentioned earlier the aroma of the very tightly rolled dark leaves somehow evoked memories of raw potatoes. I grew up on a farm, and it took me back.
So Jeremy's mentioning that when growing up on the farm, she frequently had a chance to smell raw potatoes because that's what was grown there. And so her impression of the initial smell of the leaves was dry leaves, of course, is a similarity to the raw potato smell. So really, part of what's being discussed here is this is a product of nature. And at some point, there's a crossover between many of the products of nature and an aroma that one gets. And again, all of us are going to have a different impression. So thank you for that. And let's go ahead and have you brew now. Remember to set your timers for 2 minutes. And this is bag number 3. Healing. All right, and so we were talking just a minute ago about the usual steps, and the usual steps being related to picking, and then you wither, which means for the most part they wither outside. When do they pick? They usually pick at the end of March, beginning of April, and then they actually roll or knead. Then they pile in order to have oxidation, and then they bake. So these 5 steps exactly identical to Ruby Gates, identical. Every red tea must undergo these 5 steps. But what about the remaining 10 steps? First off, what gets to go on those remaining 10 steps? Well, certainly not grade 10 or grade 9 or grade 8. It's the top 4 grades. So the prime grade, grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3. Those 4 grades get to go on the next 10 steps. Now, I ask you this. Why in the world did they come to grading all of these steps, or why did they come to grading these tea into this set of grades? They did it so that year in and year out, there would be consistency. Anytime you see grades, it's for consistency purposes. It is not necessarily relevant to what you like. It's not necessarily relevant to a particular flavor profile. Those things are not related. All right, your 2 minutes is up. You're going to separate the tea leaves from the tea liquid. Not in a hurry. Get every last drop because this makes an excellent second steeping. Let's go ahead and talk about the remaining, well, you're going to enter the quality arena. And while you're doing that and thinking about the tea, I'm going to talk about the next 10 steps. So step number 6 is to put the tea that's after it's baked on a sieve. And this is a gross sieve. By gross, I mean that the grids for which you sieve through are larger. And by the way, what's the principle here of going through a sieve? It's the same thing that all of our parents did when they used to bake. They had a sifter, right? And that sifter made uniformity of certain types of ingredients, most specifically the baking powder, the flour, and the baking soda. Today, because in the stores you got pre-sifted flour, you got desiccants in them sometimes, so they actually don't clump together. But I'll tell you what does always clump together. And if you are paying attention, you can always taste when somebody has actually sifted or not sifted. That's the baking soda. If you don't get that in the same fine grains that the baking powder and baking powder occasionally also clumps up, you will have unusual flavors. You won't have an even flavor throughout your finished product. Tea is the same, and especially these teas, once they're going through these 10 steps, they want the same relative flavor batch by batch by batch. By the way, these following 10 steps are all hand done. There is no machinery doing this. So you sift, and what you're trying to do is get relative sizes together, because not everything that comes in and has undergone the fermentation, obviously I was testing you, the oxidation is going to be the same size, is it? They want same size. They want same shape. We're not even the shape yet. They're sifting. They sift once, then they go through 2 further siftings. One is through a bamboo sifter. The second is through a cloth sifter. And as you're going through each step, the relevant space, the relevant open space for things to fall through is smaller and smaller. So you're getting smaller and smaller pieces. Now, all of you who baked before and all of you who thought about this before are thinking some things. And one of the things you're probably thinking is, okay, I get this sifting, but to me, what that means is these broken particles are going to fall through. That doesn't feel like good grade to me. That doesn't feel like boutique grade at all. That feels like carelessness. They are not careless. As they go through the further steps, almost all the rest of the further steps are about taking care of this problem. So how do they take care of it? They've got a hand fan, and they put the tea in this fan contraption. They turn it and the heavier stuff falls forward, the lighter stuff blows out here. They collect everything, but they want the heavier stuff first, because that's eventually going to be to the right grade. After they do that process 2 or 3 times, they then do a shaping process on a sieve, and a hand motion on the sieve, because they want that small curled leaf. That's what they're aiming for. So again, you're thinking to yourselves, well, wait a minute. Last week when we did Ruby Gates, they were all the same size. How does that work? Fair question. It works this way. As these things go through the sieve, what happens is they are different sizes. You still have particles. There's some that don't even go through the sieve. They're too big. They put all of those too big in a cloth container, and then they pound it against a rock, and then they try again. So you have, again, broken, whole, and then miscellaneous particles all together, right? But you've now gotten them so they all go through this very fine sieve, right? And so the whole sense of that is now you have an army of pickers who goes through one by one by one by one, and they have implements. You never stick your hand on teeth. That's not good. They have implements, and they put them on cloth, all of the same size. So you have these segmented by size. What are they doing with all this broken stuff? Yes, they're taking that and separating it too. Even the little yellow particles that come from this, they're taking that out. They're not aiming for almost. They're not aiming for an A, 95%. They're aiming for perfection. Hence, when you ask me, why does this cost so much? Now I think the answer starts to become very clear. What makes this boutique is you have this incredible process where actually you handle down to the leaf level. That's a big job. That's a huge job. How long does this whole process take? This sounds to me like this takes more than a day. Oh, yes. This takes 3 months. It's a 3-month process. Are we done? I'm done. No, we're not done. Because at the end of this process, you have 4 piles. And the 4 piles are different sizes. You have prime. Prime, remember, is the bud and the incipient leaf. First grade is a bud and a leaf. The leaf is more than incipient. Then you have second and third grades, and they're bigger and bigger. That's what you have, 4 piles. So do they sell this as an end result? Do they sell this by size? They do both things. They do sell by size, but there is yet another step where they blend so that you get a blending of sizes, and that's down lower on the pecking order and less expensive than just say all that prime size. That sounds like enough steps to me. It's not. What else do they have to do? Remember, they've been handling this stuff. Handling this stuff means incipient moisture in the air gets on the leaves, and when it gets on the leaves, the moisture content exceeds what's necessary. Yes.
I have a comment here. Rob said that he had the Cuppa booster yesterday, so his perceptions may be off, but the tea liquor went on my tongue is thick and round, but afterwards slightly drying. The flavor outline has a complex sweetness that is easy and not sharp. The flavor has hints of a warm cider. Although now I find myself seeking apples in tea because one seemed not be seen.
Yes, once seen, it cannot be unseen. I like that. So Rob focused on several things. First off, he focused on a complex sweetness. There is a complex sweetness. The Chinese would identify that right away. And as a primary forward nature of this, is it the same as a Yunnan red sweetness? No. And so Rob subtly already indicated that by talking about a complex sweetness. There's a lot going on with this. He further modified that by talking about almost a hint of fruit. And he picked apple. Some of you will pick other things. That's no problem. And further modified it by a cider flavor, which implies almost a slight undertone of spiciness. All of these things belong to this tea. And the fact that you're able to pick this all out is very impressive. The other aspect of this that Rob picked out was that astringency. There is astringency. So I ask you this, did he say heavy astringency or light astringency? He said light astringency. So it's there, it's thick in the mouth, it's got this complex sweetness. Great opening round description of this thing. This thing is wonderful. All right, I'm just about to finish up all the steps, although it seems like I'll never get them finished because every time we're supposed to be finished, looks like we're finished, we're not. There's too much moisture, so they bake again. What's the objective, aside from reducing the moisture, of this final bake? The objective is also to bring out what you just described, this aroma, this flavor. They understand that these subtle bakings will do this. You have a gross baking at the end of the first 5 steps. And listen, you do 5 steps, you get a fine tea. But it's not a tea that when Queen Elizabeth was alive and visited China that they give to her. Instead, what they give to her is the pride that's gone through all of these steps. It's a 3-month process where they have eliminated every single particle that doesn't belong in that tea. That's what the difference is. And that's, by the way, we'll explain to you, why is it we have so little healing? Well, actually, the tea shop has great amounts of healing, but healing tea is what I'm talking about, the specific red tea healing. It's because it's very expensive. And we didn't get all that much for that reason, but we love being able to present this to you so that you see at that top level what's going on and you understand what's going on. Again, most tea purveyors, when you ask them, oh, you have Chimanito. Oh, that's great. And what grade do you have? Some of them may be able to respond. And say somebody says, oh, I have prime grade. Every tea purveyor will probably want to say, I have prime grade. Then ask them the steps and see what they tell you. Because it really is a very long process with all these tiny tools and people, again, who've been in the tea industry for years and years and years. You have to have experience doing this stuff, processing at this level. This is the intangible cultural artifact. Yes.
Tea is simply delicious. This is Aggie. From the wet leaves, I got a hint of roasting. There's a sense of butter in the tea liqueur. Very slight sweetness. Makes me want an almond cookie. Smooth, juicy mouthfeel, the light astringency.
Love this comment. It's a reinforcement of light astringency, a subtle hint of sweetness. And I'm glad you put it that way because, or a slight hint of sweetness, because again, although it's obvious, it isn't knock you down sweetness like many of the Yunnan teas. This is one you have to taste through. And Aggie detected hints of caramel to this, slight hints of caramel, not burnt in a heavy manner, but in that complexity. And it reminded her that she should have an almond cookie, or that she wanted to have an almond cookie. And really, this, and let's talk a minute about why that's an important comment, especially for a Westerner. So Aggie pointed out this almond cookie. And usually when you eat things, there's a connection with what you're thinking about and what you're actually tasting. And so the fact that she brought up almond cookie, why is that significant? Almond cookies generally aren't hugely sweet. They're complex sweet, and there's a little bit of nuttiness involved in it. All of these things play into an understanding of this tea. Great comment, great comment.
Rob said the last sip gave him a hint of malt, which is what he smelled on the warm base, but didn't connect with them until the bottom of the cup.
Love this comment. Rob concludes at the bottom of the cup, or once he gets to the bottom of the cup, that there's a hint of malt. I really appreciate this comment because, again, when you link it with all the others, there's complexity. Yes, it is sweet. Oh, and Aggie mentioned it's juicy. By the way, I love that part of the comment because while we're tasting this and so focused on the tea itself, nobody had mentioned that juiciness, and there definitely is a juiciness. So what does juiciness imply? And I'll get back to Rob's malt comment in a minute. What does juiciness imply? It implies that you're going to drink this fast. And typically when we serve this and we watch people, they do drink it fast. And it's not just because it's at a lesser temperature, it's because it is so consistent with Western, a little bit sweeter palate, that there's this tendency to drink it really, really fast. So let's get back to the malt for a minute, because now that Rob has said that, many of you will reflect back to those first tastes. And yes, it was underneath there. I just didn't get that first. And it definitely is here. And as you go through, it's good that you keep paying attention, because then all the flavors make themselves apparent. Yes.
Jeremy said the tea has an immense drama in the mouth. First rush with a juicy balsam, leaving a bit of dryness on the lips and front of mouth. Thirst quenching, warm to the core, very smooth swallow.
Warm to the core. So already an energetics comment. There's a warmth that goes throughout you. Jeremy also mentioned that there's light astringency, there's a juiciness, and that there's drama. She opened with drama, meaning, the way I understand what she said is there's complexity. It's that sort of drama. It's all of these flavors interacting with one another. And by talking about juiciness, she suggests, again, a quick drink. Now, if you did not use tea rhythm, say you were working on an important assignment and somebody put this down and you drank this stuff. First off, you would likely drink it fast. And second off, you wouldn't have rocked all of this. Now, every time you drink this, you'll think about these things because you've gone through this tea rhythm process.
Scott mentioned lots of energetics.
So Scott talked about enormous amount of energetics, and there are. I get not only a warming, for me personally, And again, you don't have to get any of the things that I get, but for me personally, I actually have an uptick in energy. Not quite sure why, because not all the reds give me that uptick in energy, but this one definitely does. And for me, and again, this is very personal, so if you aren't getting this, don't feel bad, because this isn't the rules. This is just me personally. I get a focus that I don't normally get with reds either. And so I like this one a lot, because not only do I get slight energy and the warmth and the juiciness, but it makes me want to focus. Anything else?
Aggie, warming and stimulating. She's ready to go out and do something meaningful.
Hey, there you go. Warming and stimulating for Aggie, ready to go out and do something meaningful. And I think you're saying essentially the same things I just said, because wanting to go out and do something meaningful means you have focus. That means that there's this uptick. And there clearly is with this tea. This is really, really special as a tea from the Qihun area. And by the way, just so that you're all clear, Qiman is the lead player. Qimanilo, I should say, is the lead player in the Qihun area. But actually, Qihun covers quite a few sub-varietals. And when you treat them like this, you get an incredible result. And so you might be wondering, if you're getting this result, why in the world would anybody do red tea in a non-Kung Fu manner? Well, let's think about that for a minute. Wait a minute. 3 extra months of processing. Oh my, that's expensive. Oh, and I have to look at every single leaf. Wow, that's inconvenient. And I have to have people who have at least 10 to 15 years experience. Oh, that's very expensive. This is why this is really only in certain areas. In China, the largest Kung Fu producers are all in the Qiman environments. You do get individual producers, just as we saw last week from Hunan. Yunnan would be the second largest area, and that's because, remembering our history, in 1938, 2 gentlemen from Anhui, from the Qiman area, opened the first red tea factory in Yunnan. So they had this knowledge in their head. They realized they didn't have the workers to actually execute it, but over the years, they've started to do that with some of the teas with some wonderful, wonderful results.
Jean mentioned that it's comforting to the stomach.
Jeannie mentioned it's comforting to the stomach. I love this energetic. In general, red teas will calm your stomach from a Chinese medicine perspective, particularly if the upsets are caused by tension, more so than an upset caused by eating heavy foods. Heavy foods, typically Chinese practitioners, Chinese medicine practitioners will talk about poor. But this also would work for, so long as it isn't habitual heavy eating, this would work for that as well. Okay. Oh, and I managed to go over time. Your comments were right on the money with this. And the fact that you were able to perceive the complexity of this right away was really great. And I salute you for that, because again, many people who thoughtlessly drink this would not catch those complexities. You'll always now, every time you have a cup of this, understand these complexities. So great job with that. Next week, we start a new round. And next week, I believe the first one on the new round is a tea we've had here since the beginning. It's a green tea plus peat. So we'll have that next Saturday. And we have a lot to talk about with that one. Because in some ways it's related to tea in Japan, and we'll get into that in detail. Lastly, I hope all of you have a very healthy week and that you're careful during this week as you are every week, and look forward to seeing all of you again next week. You take care. Bye-bye now.